Andrew J. Thomas here, and today we're going to be talking about characters, or specifically the 5 leading characters in Entanglement. So that's Jenny and Nigel, Liz and David, and Erica. And one of the questions people ask me about my characters is where the names came from, and another one often is where the personality traits and characteristics came from. So I'll talk about those two things. And the funny thing about Jenny, Nigel, Liz, David, and Erica is that apart from a very good friend called David, I don't know anybody with any of those names, and they just sort of came out of the air, really. When it comes to the surnames, I've got a couple of slightly more logical answers, insofar as Nigel's surname is the make of my wallet. David's surname is a favourite author of both myself and my dad. And but the others are completely random. So these just came straight out of my imagination. And although I'm sure there was some linkage back to something in the past that led me to them, I can't really say more than that. The only thing I would say is that some of the characters, David, for example, changed name a couple of times while I was writing the book. And eventually I ended up putting together a little spreadsheet showing all the first names and second names of each character, just to make sure that I didn't have anything much in the way of duplication. I did end up with Jessica, of course, up in Korean Lock, and Jenny, so those are, same first 2 letters, but they sound different to the ear, and they don't have many scenes together and so on. So that didn't seem to be to be a concern for me. But as I say, the Christian names and surnames of those 5 main characters, to a large extent, just straight out of my imagination. When it comes to personality traits, though, it's a very different story. And one of my friends, a good friend called Diane over in the States, who was kind enough, along with David, who I mentioned before, to read an early version of the book, now refers to me as Nigel, because she perceives there to be a lot of me in that particular character. And there's a grain of truth in that, insofar as there is quite a lot of me in both Nigel and Jenny, in fact. On the Nigel side, I'm about as random as he is, and my dress sense is quite similar to his own. And also, as you can see from the scene behind me, my home is very much what his was modelled on. Jenny, on the other hand, very neat and tidy, which is me, has a couple of cats, which is me, well, 3 now, and so I'm sort of spread, if you like, across those 2 characters. When it comes to all the others, though, or rather when it came to writing all the others, I started out just really writing them for their role in the story rather than who they actually were. And then yet another one of my early readers, Peter, he commented, well, he asked the question, would I like these people if I met them down the pub? And that got me thinking as to the level of characterization that I'd put into the characters, which at that point in time, candidly, was not that much. The first draft of the story was very much plot-based rather than character-led. And it was with that question of his that I started to build out the characters considerably more. And courtesy of help from another friend in the same age band as the main characters, I was able to add some of the things like music tastes and literary tastes and things of that sort to those characters. As for how they speak, though, and elements of also just who they are, what drives them, their values, and their look as well, partly in terms of obvious things like height and build and hair colour and so on, but also just how I perceive them to be in scenes and so on. A lot of that came from people who I know, and I do have a sheet, a document on the laptop, which has got each character. So you've got all, each row is a character, and then against that, brief character description. So, David would be 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, etc., etc. And then a piece on any linguistic distinctions. So again, sticking with David, spent many years in the RAF, so he's got quite a clipped, sort of commanding accent, whereas Nigel, for example, like myself, comes from Bristol originally, and there's a few characteristics about the Bristolian accent which come through in how Nigel actually appears on the page. So words like "and" very rarely for real Bristolians have the D on the end, so it's just "an." I can't think of a sentence off the top of my head. And there are other aspects of the accent which actually came through in physically how he appears in type on the page. But what I was leading around to saying was that apart from Nigel and Jenny, who, as I say, had a lot of their characteristics like me, and I had very clear visions as to what they looked like. Nigel, I suppose, on some level, a bit like myself, but younger. And Jenny, I'm not sure where her look came from, actually, although it was extremely clear in my mind. All the others, though, on this sheet that I was just referring to, the right-hand column gives the name of somebody who I know, who is in my life or has been in my life, who is my sort of mental model for that person. So, when I'm writing a particular character, if I'm stuck for an aspect of kind of how they might move in a particular circumstance or facial expressions, things of that sort, I can think, what would Lawrence be like under those circumstances? Because he was kind of my mental image for David. And it was sort of, I get that now. So it was a nice little touchstone to keep going back to have those real people who I referred to while thinking of the different characters. So that, I suppose, is probably the end of this little video. As I say, I hadn't specifically planned what I was going to be saying here today, much like the writing itself. It just seems to happen. But the names came from a variety of household items lying around on my desk in front of me, and also making sure there wasn't too much duplication in terms of first initials and things of that sort. But the characteristics, the personalities, they were, excuse me, they did come very much from people in real life, and also all the feedback that I received from people. My friend Jess, whose name led through to being Jess in the latter part of the book, she actually was great at giving me a few hints about character tastes and so on, because she's very much the right sort of age. And in fact, she made one observation about Liz's character based on everything that I'd written, but which I'd never thought of. So I suppose my lesson for today for you is certainly keep people in mind when you're picturing your characters. I found it very helpful. I would suggest you might as well. But don't be afraid to take that input from others. In fact, actively encourage it, I would say, because their perspective on your characters is maybe even more important than your own, because at the end of the day, they're the people who are reading, buying your book and so on. So how they come across and how they'll behave and so on is something that is important in terms of how it comes across to them, rather than perhaps how they exist in your own mind. So there we go. That's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed this short one, and I will speak again soon. Bye for now.